I stood with my best friend, Emily Johnson, under the shadow of a tall fence, our hearts pounding as the distant glow of a flashlight swept closer. Emily glanced at me, her voice barely above a whisper. Sophia, my dad's here. I nodded, my throat tight. I see him. But why do you look more scared than I am? Emily asked, genuinely confused. I closed my eyes, my stomach sinking, because I see Ethan. Emily's gaze followed mine, and she gasped when she spotted the tall, lean figure approaching. She shot me a sympathetic look. Regret flooded my mind. Why had I thought it was a good idea to sneak out with Emily and climb the neighborhood fence? And why, of all nights, did we have to run into the security patrol? Before I could finish my thought, Ethan Carter was standing in front of me, backlit by the street lamp. His expression was unreadable, but I knew it was anything but friendly. What are you standing there for? Waiting for someone to carry your body? Ethan's voice was as sharp as ever. I swallowed hard, my words stumbling out. Tonight was just a fluke. I swear. Ethan, please don't tell my mom. Okay. I was terrified of Ethan, not just because of his cold, intimidating demeanor, but because he was my neighbor, and my mom adored him. If he ratted me out, I'd be grounded for life. Ethan let out a cold laugh. So that's why you gave them my number? Yeah, I admitted, my voice small. I felt a pang of guilt. It was late, and Ethan probably should have been asleep. But with my dad always away and my mom being, well, my mom. Ethan was the first person I'd thought to call when things went south. I glanced up at him, my eyes pleading. Even in the dim light, I could see the sharp angles of his face, his expression unyielding. Without a word, Ethan grabbed my wrist and started pulling me away. I shot a desperate look at Emily, who only gave me a good luck shrug. My heart sank. I was doomed. Then, I froze. Up ahead, another figure was approaching. My stomach dropped. Ethan smirked. Yep, that's your mom. My heart turned to stone as I let Ethan drag me forward. When we reached my mom, I braced myself for the worst. But just as we stopped, I felt Ethan's grip tighten slightly. I glanced down at his hand, long, elegant fingers, the kind that could make even holding a pencil look artistic. Ethan let go and offered my mom a polite smile. Sorry for the trouble. I didn't mean to drag you out here so late. My mom shot me a death glare before turning back to Ethan. It's no problem. Thanks for looking out for her. My jaw nearly hit the ground. What was happening? Ethan nodded. Let's get her home. I climbed into the back of the cab, my mind spinning. When we got home, my mom started rambling to Ethan about how much of a hassle I was. But strangely, she didn't say a word to me. I knew this was the calm before the storm. As Ethan turned to leave, he gave me one last glance, his expression unreadable. Then he was gone. I couldn't believe it. After all these years of friendship, he didn't even stick up for me. My mom practically worshipped him. Before I could dwell on it, my mom marched inside. I scrambled to follow, my survival instincts kicking in. Mom, I swear, this is the last time. My mom snorted. Your promises are worthless. Stand there for 10 minutes and think about what you've done. School starts tomorrow, and you're still acting like a child. I stared at her, stunned. That was it. No grounding, no lecture. My mom disappeared into the laundry room, leaving me standing in the living room, utterly confused. Was my mom finally cutting me some slack? The next morning, I stepped out of the car at Harvard University and spotted Ethan by the entrance. He was talking to Olivia Smith, the most beautiful girl in their department. According to some silly poll Emily had mentioned, I had once asked where I ranked, and Emily had deadpanned, "You're number 1 on the least like a girl list." I had laughed it off, but now, watching Ethan and Olivia, I couldn't help but feel a pang of irritation. I shot Ethan what I hoped was a menacing glare, even though he didn't even glance my way. Emily zoomed past on her bike, skidding to a stop beside me. So, you're still alive? She asked, looking up with a smirk. I raised an eyebrow, feigning confidence. Of course, my mom probably realized I'm her precious little angel. She couldn't possibly stay mad at me. Emily snorted, and Ethan, who was standing nearby, turned to give me his usual cold stare. I met his gaze without flinching. His eyes were ridiculously good-looking, and I'd had years to get used to them. Anyone else would have looked away after 3 seconds. When Ethan didn't break eye contact, I touched my face and walked over. Do I have something on my face? Olivia, who had been standing with him, quietly excused herself and walked away. Ethan's lips parted. Where's my watch? I froze. It's broken. I blurted out before I could stop myself. Ethan raised an eyebrow, clearly not surprised. I forced a sheepish smile. Don't worry. I didn't lose it. I just forgot to bring it. I'll get it to you after break. Promise. Ethan let out a cold laugh. Seriously? I insisted, my voice rising in panic. I'll give it back. Ethan's eyes dropped, his long, dark lashes casting shadows on his cheeks. I almost reached out to tug on them. You'd better, he said, lifting his gaze back to me. I nodded vigorously, eager to end the conversation. The sun was blazing, and the campus was alive with students running around. Emily and I started walking down the stairs. Sophia. Look, Emily said, pointing toward the basketball court. Ethan was leaning against one of the hoops, looking as cool and detached as ever. He'd tossed his jacket aside and was wearing a plain white t-shirt that clung to his lean, athletic frame. Wow, Emily muttered. If Ethan looks like that now, imagine what he'll be like in a few years. She turned to me with a grin. You should make your move now before someone else snatches him up. I nearly tripped. Are you trying to give me a heart attack in the middle of the day? Emily rolled her eyes, clearly annoyed by my lack of initiative. The heat was getting to me, so I decided to find some shade and chat with the teacher. But before I could take a step, someone called my name. I turned to see Olivia, who looked a little hesitant. Sophia, since you're close with Ethan, could you give me his phone number? Why don't you just ask him? I asked, confused. I thought they were pretty friendly. Olivia bit her lip, and I immediately understood. She was too shy to ask him directly. Sure, I said with a wave. I'll go get it for you. I walked over to Ethan, who was watching a pickup game on the court. I sat down beside him. Why aren't you playing? You're good at basketball. They're terrible, he replied without looking at me. That's not a nice thing to say, I scolded, trying to sound serious. Ethan finally turned to me, his dark eyes catching the sunlight, making them look like they were full of stars. My heart skipped a beat. And, he said, his voice calm but challenging. I took a deep breath, trying to ignore the strange flutter in my chest. Olivia was still watching us, so I casually asked, Hey, what's your phone number again? Ethan looked surprised for a split second. Then his expression turned icy. You don't remember my number? Then how did you call me last night? I wanted to explain that it had been a moment of panic, and I'd dialed without thinking, but instead, I defended myself. I don't even remember my own number. Why would I remember yours? Ethan's face hardened, and he turned back to the game, completely ignoring me. I walked back to Olivia, feeling guilty. Sorry, I think I made him mad. I didn't get the number. Olivia's smile faltered, but she nodded. It's okay. I glanced back at Ethan, who was still sitting there, radiating coldness, despite his mood. Girls walking by couldn't help but sneak glances at him. I couldn't help but wonder if my mom's obsession with him was just because he was so ridiculously good-looking. After all, she was a total sucker for handsome faces. I remembered her once saying, while watching a TV show, I should have waited a bit longer before marrying your dad. I had no response to that, realizing that my future thesis might heavily depend on Ethan's goodwill. I decided it was time to smooth things over. I couldn't afford any missteps. So, I dashed into the supermarket, grabbed a bottle of Evian water and a few candies, and set off to find him. I cornered him outside the lecture hall, holding out my peace offering. Ethan stared at me with that cool, unreadable expression of his. I grinned awkwardly, suddenly feeling like one of those sleazy characters from TV dramas who corner people with ulterior motives. Ethan, I said, trying to sound sincere. I was just messing with you earlier. I do remember your phone number. After some thought, I figured this was probably why he'd been upset, though I couldn't quite understand why it mattered so much. Ethan paused, his eyes narrowing. Prove it. Recite it. I took a deep breath. Okay, I'll have it memorized by tonight. I swear. Ethan, you've never been one to hold grudges. You're the bigger person here. So let's just forget about it. Okay. I reached out as if to grab his hand. But Ethan took a sudden step back. He snatched the water and candies from me, brushed past, and headed upstairs without a word. I stood there, frozen. What was that about? We'd been through so much together since we were kids. Was he seriously pulling the boys and girls can't touch card now? And it's not like I'm unattractive. Why was he so resistant? I took a deep breath, reminding myself that he'd accepted my peace offering. That had to mean he'd forgiven me, right? With that thought, I calmed down and headed into the building. That evening, after study hall, I waited outside the finance department. Back in high school, Ethan and I used to walk home together every day, but he was so quiet, and I found it boring. So I eventually stopped. Turns out, Ethan never lacked company on his way home. I couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. How did he manage to have such a good social life? I'd felt guilty for ditching him, but it seemed like he didn't care at all. As I was lost in thought, I heard laughter. I looked up and saw Ethan walking out, surrounded by 4 or 5 guys. They were chatting and laughing, but Ethan, as usual, looked calm and detached. He walked in the center of the group, his striking features impossible to miss. Somehow, his dark eyes locked onto mine through the crowd, and he gave me a faint, mocking smile. My legs suddenly felt like jelly. What's this? The campus walls aren't enough for you to climb anymore, he asked as he approached. No, I said, embarrassed. I didn't want to revisit that topic. I'm here for you. For some reason, a line from a song popped into my head. The sky is waiting for the rain, and I'm waiting for you. Ethan visibly hesitated, and I swear I saw the tips of his ears turn red. I immediately wondered if I'd said something wrong. But it seemed like a perfectly normal statement. Why was he reacting like this? The next second, Ethan frowned at me. What are you staring at? Are your feet glued to the ground? Ah. There was the Ethan I knew. I hurried to catch up with him. The night was chilly, and I shivered, regretting not bringing a jacket. Ethan suddenly stopped and handed me his coat. I took it, feeling grateful but trying to play it cool. You sure this is okay? His jacket smelled amazing, clean and fresh, and I couldn't help but sniff it a little too enthusiastically. Your jacket smells so good, I blurted out. Sophia. Ethan snapped, his face darkening. I quickly put it on. Why are you so mad? I glanced at him and noticed his ears were still red. What was going on? Had his ears been drinking or something? My eyes wandered to his collarbone, and I froze. His skin was pale, and the neckline of his t-shirt revealed just enough to be distracting. I swallowed hard. Like what you see? He asked, his voice low. Yeah, I answered without thinking. Then I realized what I'd said and looked up to meet his dark, mesmerizing eyes. In that moment, I panicked. Ethan tilted my head away with a finger and looked down at me. Sophia. You're such a pervert. My brain short-circuited. I recovered quickly, though, and shot back. I compliment you, and this is how you respond. We're officially done. The night was quiet, but I could have sworn I heard a soft, melodic laugh. When I turned to look, Ethan's expression was as stoic as ever. Had I imagined it? I sighed, frustrated. What was going on with Ethan? Since starting college, he'd become so annoying. As we reached the tree-lined path, Ethan stopped and turned to me. So, why did you wait for me? I hesitated, then offered. Want to grab some late-night food? Ethan's eyebrow twitched. I thought you were on a diet. I froze. I'm not that fat. I didn't say you were, he replied, crossing his arms. Just reminding you of your own words. Ugh, I didn't need the reminder. The school cafeteria was buzzing with activity, the air filled with the clatter of trays and the aroma of various dishes. I stood frozen in front of the food counter, torn between the chicken cutlet and, well, the other chicken cutlet. My face was a mask of indecision. Ethan, on the other hand, had no such struggles. He swiped a bowl of dumplings with the ease of someone who didn't overthink every life choice. Towering over the crowd, he glanced down at me with mild amusement. Do you always take this long to decide? I sighed. Yes. Help me out here. What should I get? Spaghetti, he said without hesitation. But the chicken cutlet is calling my name, I whined. Then get the chicken cutlet. But the chicken cutlet goes so well with miso soup, I countered. Still waffling, Ethan took a deep breath, pinching the bridge of his nose. Sophia. Either pick something or get out of line. I finally settled on the chicken cutlet, though not without a dramatic sigh. The cafeteria was packed, and it took me forever to find a spot by the wall. I waved Ethan over, and he sauntered over. Looking completely unbothered by the chaos around us, Ethan ate with the elegance of someone who'd been born with a silver spoon. Emily once said that good-looking people could make even the most mundane activities look graceful, though her specific example was, let's just say, unnecessary. I shoveled a forkful of food into my mouth and grinned. Ethan, you eat like a prince. He paused, raising an eyebrow. And you eat like a pig. I was about to fire back when a sudden scream cut through the noise. A girl had accidentally spilled some hot soup on Ethan's arm. The weird part, Ethan didn't even flinch. But the girl was acting like she'd just witnessed a murder. Ethan calmly grabbed a napkin and wiped the stain from his sleeve. The girl was practically in tears. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? I jumped up and pulled back Ethan's sleeve to check. His fair skin was already turning red. Yeah. He's definitely not okay, I said. My tone serious. The girl looked like she was about to cry, so I softened my voice. But don't worry. He's tough. He can handle it. Ethan's lips twitched downward, clearly unimpressed. The girl left, still looking guilty, and I turned to him. You okay? That looked painful. He shot me a look. I'm fine. I can handle it. A few weeks later, fall was in full swing, and the dean announced a hiking field trip. I scanned the list of groups and nearly squealed when I saw Ethan's name right below mine. We were in the same group. I raced to find him, bursting with excitement. Ethan, we're in the same group. Isn't that amazing? He was filling his water bottle in the stairwell and didn't even turn around. Thrilled. He deadpanned that. I gasped. Did you just swear? Are you feeling okay? I reached out to feel his forehead, but he swatted my hand away. You're the one who needs help, he muttered. Later, I was sulking on the steps outside the cafeteria when Daniel Brown plopped down beside me. He had this mischievous look about him, like he was always ready to stir up trouble. Sophia, he said. What group are you in for the hike? Group B, I replied. My voice flat, his face lit up. No way. Me too. We're gonna have a blast. Just like old times. He threw an arm around my shoulders, squeezing a little too tight that I was about to protest when a water bottle suddenly smacked Daniel's arm, forcing him to let go. We both looked up to see Ethan standing there, his expression icy. He was wearing a gray hoodie, and for some reason, he looked even more intimidating than usual. Here, he said, tossing the water bottle to me. Thought you might need this. Daniel looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. I, on the other hand, was too confused to react. Thanks. Ethan gave me a curt nod. Sophia, come with me to the equipment room. I pointed at myself. Me. Why? Despite my confusion, I followed him, shooting Daniel an apologetic look. He stared back at me like I'd just betrayed him. I wanted to explain, but Ethan reached back and gently nudged my head forward. His familiar scent calming me down. The equipment room was a mess, and organizing it was not how I wanted to spend my lunch break. I shot Ethan a glare as he knelt on the floor, methodically sorting through gear. Why am I here again? I grumbled that he didn't look up. Because you're the only one I trust not to mess this up. I rolled my eyes but couldn't help the small smile that crept onto my face. Maybe Ethan wasn't so bad after all. Ethan seemed to sense my intense gaze and paused, frowning as he looked up at me. Do you like Daniel? I nearly choked. What kind of question was that? I'm just tired, I muttered, brushing off his bizarre assumption. Without looking up, Ethan said, then sleep on the table over there. I blinked in surprise. Really? Suit yourself, he replied, his tone indifferent. I didn't need to be told twice. I plopped down at the table, resting my chin on my arms, but guilt quickly crept in. Ethan, if you're tired, let me know. We can switch. He let out a short laugh. This isn't guard duty, Sophia. I rolled my eyes and closed mine, drifting off to sleep. Sometime later, I woke up to the sound of someone tapping the table. Ethan stood in front of me, his face slightly flushed from the heat of the equipment room and the work he'd been doing. He looked at me with that familiar, unreadable expression, and my heart did that weird fluttery thing again. Done? I asked, trying to sound casual as I sat up. Yeah, he said, his voice calm. Suddenly, Ethan leaned in closer, studying my face. Sophia, why are you blushing? What? I'm not. I stammered, leaning back instinctively. He reached out to steady me, his face now uncomfortably close. My heart raced, and panic set in. Ethan. My legs cramping, and it really was cramping. Later, Emily would tell me that I had a knack for ruining romantic moments. I brushed it off. The day of the field trip was bright and sunny. I stood at the school gate with Emily, a piece of toast hanging from my mouth and a backpack slung over my shoulder. Next thing I knew, Daniel appeared beside me, looking like he'd just stepped out of a fashion show, or a wrestling match. Daniel, why are you dressed like that? I asked, eyeing his skin-tight outfit. What? This is modern style. Cool, right? He said, grinning like an idiot. I wanted to shove my toast in his face. You're blinding me. Daniel was about to retaliate when he noticed Ethan staring at him from a distance. Crap. I didn't realize he was here, Daniel muttered under his breath. I glanced over and saw Ethan looking at me with that familiar, mom about to ground you expression. I shivered and quickly pushed Daniel away. Ugh. When had Ethan learned to look so intimidating? And why was I, a grown woman, scared of someone only 2 months older than me? As more people gathered at the gate, Emily nudged me and pointed ahead. I looked up and saw Olivia standing nearby, smiling at Ethan as he talked to her. I instinctively took a step forward, but Emily grabbed my arm. What are you doing? Jealous? What? No, I said, though the word felt weird in my mouth. Then why are you trying to break them up? Her words stung. Break them up? Were they even a thing? They were just talking. Ethan and I had known each other since we were kids. If anyone was his other half, it was me. Wait, where did that thought come from? I shook my head and followed Emily onto the bus. But I couldn't deny that the sight of Ethan and Olivia together had bothered me. Maybe I was losing it. On the bus, I slumped in my seat, trying to nap. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan and Olivia standing together. I felt moody, like I was PMSing or something. Suddenly, a shadow fell over me. I looked up to see Ethan standing there, his usual cool expression softened by a hint of concern. What's wrong? Nothing, I said firmly. As the bus started moving, Ethan took a seat near me. Hey, Sophia, Emily whispered, leaning in. Want to go to Starlight Fun Park over Thanksgiving break? I was in no mood for her travel plans. I have to study for the TOEFL. If I fail, my mom will kill me. And even if she's not around, Ethan will do it for her. The bus ride took about half an hour before we finally arrived at the hiking spot. It was a popular area, especially for outdoor enthusiasts. The dean claimed this trip was about balancing work and play. Yeah, right. More like working us to death. My stamina was terrible, like, embarrassingly bad. After the teacher finished explaining the rules, he added, the first 5 to reach the top get popsicles. Seriously, popsicles? Were we 5 years old? Sophia, slow down. Emily called from behind me as I charged ahead. I'm going to get one of those popsicles, I declared, determined. But by the halfway point, I was done. I was panting like a dog, completely wiped out. Some of my classmates had already given up and were resting on the trail. My eyes zeroed in on Ethan handing a bottle of water to Olivia. My heart practically stopped. After that, Ethan walked over to me, giving me a light tap on the shoulder. Thought you were in a hurry. I looked at him, heartbroken. I want water too. Ethan paused, then handed me a bottle. I stared at it in shock. How much water did you bring? What? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Realizing what I meant, he sighed. That was Olivia's. I was just passing it to her. I took a few big gulps, then wiped my mouth. Ethan, I can't go any further. We were only halfway to the summit. And most of the others were already far ahead. Looks like I wasn't getting that popsicle after all. Then rest here, Ethan said, sitting down on a nearby rock. I stood on the trail, sighing dramatically. Who do you think will finish first? Before I could finish, a long, slender hand appeared in front of me, holding a popsicle. Ethan's hand was as perfect as his face. The sunlight caught on his knuckles, giving them a warm, golden glow. I almost screamed. How do you have this? Ethan started counting down. 3, 2. I snatched it from his hand and eagerly tore off the wrapper. Well, Ethan, we're officially last, I said, grinning. He replied, unbothered. I patted his shoulder. But at least I got my popsicle. You're such a good friend. Ethan gave me a deadpan look. Go away. After that incident, Emily started suspecting there was something going on between Ethan and me. The first long weekend of college arrived, and I was in my dorm, trying to focus on studying. Emily called, and as soon as I answered, her loud voice blasted through the phone. Sophia. Are you sure you don't want to come with me? There's a new game here, and if you win, you get a giant teddy bear. You're really going to miss out. Damn it. Emily knew exactly how to tempt me. I took a few deep breaths, trying to stay calm. Emily, are you even ready for the TOEFL exam? She scoffed. You forget how good I am at studying. It's a breeze for me. I yelled into the phone. I'm not interested. And hung up. I tried to focus on my book, but Emily's words kept nagging at me. All I could think about was that giant teddy bear in Starlight Fun Park. So, when I ran into Ethan on the field later, I blurted out, giant teddy bear. Ethan paused, narrowing his eyes. I quickly corrected myself. I mean, Ethan, you're playing ball. Finished your book? He asked. I nodded. Of course. Want me to quiz you? No thanks, I said nervously. No one believed in me. The world was truly heartless. After a moment of silence, Ethan spoke again, his voice low. Why did you call me giant teddy bear earlier? I awkwardly explained Emily's offer. To my surprise, Ethan looked at me and asked, do you want to go? Why did he have to look at me like that? My heart was doing that stupid fluttering thing again. Maybe I was sick. Or maybe he was just using his looks to mess with me. But I could never figure out what Ethan was thinking. After some internal debate, I lied through my teeth. My mind is only on the TOEFL exam. Ethan wasn't buying it. He smirked. Sophia, do you even believe that? I didn't. Ethan took a few steps forward, then stopped and said quietly, if you want to go, go. My eyes widened. Really? Just this once, he said, looking at me before walking away. I didn't waste any time. I rushed back to my dorm, changed, and called Emily. She said she'd meet me at the entrance. I was about to sprint out the door when someone grabbed my wrist. I thought Ethan had changed his mind and tried to pull away. My face filled with frustration. 5, 4, 3. I stopped in my tracks. I pouted at him, and Ethan looked like he was trying not to gag. Stop making that face. Are you taking it back? Ethan, you know what they say, a man's word is his bond. I protested. Shut up. Ethan said, letting go of my wrist. After a moment of silence, he added, I'm coming with you. My jaw dropped. Ethan was coming with me. That was as likely as Emily willingly fighting a dog for food. My shock must have been obvious because Ethan added flatly, your mom asked me to keep an eye on you in college. Make sure you don't do anything embarrassing. And so, Ethan and I took a cab to the Starlight Fun Park strip. The place was packed, mostly with people around our age. I suddenly noticed something strange. Most of the eyes around us seemed to be darting in our direction. I touched my face, wondering if I'd somehow become even more stunning overnight. Then I saw two girls walk up to Ethan, blushing as they asked for his number. Oh, right. I forgot he was here too. I instinctively clenched my jaw, watching the interaction closely. Ethan seemed caught off guard. He frowned and shook his head, delivering the most absurd excuse I'd ever heard. I don't have a phone. His rejection was both ruthless and hilariously lazy. The two girls walked away, looking disappointed. I couldn't help but pat Ethan's arm. a hint of smugness in my voice. You're really good at lying with a straight face. Ha! Ethan scoffed but didn't respond. He lazily tilted his chin toward something behind me, and I turned to see Emily rushing toward me. Buddha once warned me to stay away from people with the last name Ning. But Emily was an exception. She nearly knocked me over with her enthusiasm. And I stumbled back 3 steps. Thankfully, Ethan grabbed the back of her collar, saving me from an embarrassing fall. Emily immediately shrank back when she saw Ethan. I rolled my eyes at her lack of courage and pushed her forward. Enough talk. Let's go. As we walked through the strip, Ethan turned down one person after another. I watched, gritting my teeth, but there was nothing I could say. Emily leaned in close. See, I told you, Ethan's going to be unstoppable. Who can handle all this attention? I glanced over at Ethan, who was calmly rejecting another girl. He was wearing a black t-shirt that made his skin look almost porcelain, his dark hair casually falling over his forehead. Under the flickering lights, his features were striking, sharp and captivating. I suddenly wondered how I'd never noticed how good-looking he was before. Emily's game challenge was simple. Write numbers from 1 to 1,000 in one go without mistakes or long pauses. For a college student like me, it seemed like a piece of cake. Confidently, I picked up the pen and started writing. Ethan stood beside me, watching. When I reached 100, I paused and looked up at him. Can you not stand so close? You're blocking the light, and I might make a mistake. Really, it was because Ethan's presence made me nervous, and nervousness led to mistakes. Ethan didn't argue and stepped aside. I kept writing, but when I reached 519, I felt someone behind me. I looked up to see Ethan standing there, watching over my shoulder. Did he really not trust my math skills? Before I could say anything, Ethan spoke. You can't pause for too long. Sophia. Keep writing. 143. My heart skipped a beat, and my ears turned red. Why did even reciting numbers sound like a confession when Ethan did it? In the end, I managed to finish without a single mistake. The owner handed me the giant teddy bear, and I grinned from ear to ear. Emily reached over to touch it, but then she spotted a bubble machine in the distance and ran off to check it out. I hugged the teddy bear, feeling triumphant. Ethan stood beside me, his voice flat. Idiot. I was too happy to care. Ethan, don't you want to play anything? He snorted. Clearly too cool for such mundane activities. Suddenly, fireworks lit up the sky. I looked up, murmuring, so pretty. You know, whenever I see fireworks, I feel like it's my birthday. Is that so? Ethan replied, his tone indifferent. Then he glanced at me. Do you also know it's time to go back? I blinked. You set a curfew. Ethan chuckled. Got it right. Emily wasn't ready to leave, so I reluctantly said goodbye to her and started walking back toward Harvard University with Ethan. People still stared at him as we walked, and it annoyed me. On a whim, I shoved the teddy bear into Ethan's arms. He paused. What's wrong with you? Be a good guy and carry it for me. It's so big. My arms are tired, I said without missing a beat. Ethan didn't argue, though a guy like him holding a giant teddy bear was a pretty funny sight. The bear covered half his face, and I smiled smugly to myself. When we reached the school gates, we ran into someone I wasn't exactly thrilled to see, Olivia. She stood there with a stack of books, her figure slender and delicate. When she turned and saw us, she hesitated, then smiled. Ethan. Oh. Come on. Was I invisible? Olivia's gaze shifted to me, and she gave a polite smile. Sophia. I returned what I hoped was a graceful smile and asked, what are you doing here? Olivia bit her lip. I'm going home for a bit. Then her eyes lingered on Ethan. I narrowed my eyes. Was she hinting that Ethan should walk her to the station? Ethan nodded. We'll head out then. I had to give him credit. He was the epitome of a clueless guy. Just like Emily always said. Olivia looked taken aback, then said with a hint of disappointment, I've been waiting for a while. But no bus has come. Just as I thought Ethan might reconsider, he pointed down the street. Isn't that a cab? A taxi was approaching on the otherwise empty street. I had to bite back a laugh. Ethan was truly something else. Olivia forced a smile and said goodbye. After she left, I couldn't resist teasing Ethan. I thought you were going to walk her. She's so pretty. Yet you're immune to her charms. Stop talking nonsense, Ethan said, his tone indifferent. I blinked, but a smile crept onto my face. I wasn't planning on walking her. He added, for some reason. That made me inexplicably happy. The school forum was buzzing again, another confession for Ethan. I tried to ignore it, but Emily wasn't having it. Sophia. I'm serious, Emily said, patting my shoulder with a knowing look. A guy like Ethan, if you miss your chance, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Once we graduate, we'll all go our separate ways. When will you ever see him again? Don't you want to seize the moment? I froze, my brow furrowing. Emily stared at me, her expression blank. I was just saying it casually. But, wow, you're already into him, aren't you? I flinched, my voice rising in protest. That's bullshit. Emily burst out laughing, doubling over as I tried to recover from my outburst. But that night, I had a dream. I was walking on a deserted beach, the ocean deep blue and eerily calm, breathtakingly beautiful. Suddenly, a fierce wind tore through the air, and the sea split open. A figure emerged from the depths. He was stunning, sharp features, dark eyes like jade, a tall nose, and lips that were both thin and soft. He was even more beautiful than the ocean itself. But when I realized it was Ethan, I panicked. He walked toward me, his head tilting slightly as he smiled. Mischievous and charming. Why are you looking at me like that? Do you like me? I shouted. Don't talk nonsense. Ethan laughed, his figure slowly fading away. But his deep, melodic voice echoed in my ears. I know you like me. I woke up with a start, sitting bolt upright in bed. My forehead was damp with sweat, and my face was burning. I buried my face in my hands, finally admitting to myself that I might actually like Ethan. The long break arrived, and the weather began to cool. In the past, I'd always gone home with Ethan during holidays. After all, we were neighbors. This time, my dad was actually home, a rare occurrence. When I walked into the house, I saw him sitting on the couch, reading the newspaper and occasionally chatting with my mom, who was knitting a scarf. It's not even winter yet. Who are you knitting that for, Mom? I grabbed an apple and took a bite. It was crisp and sweet. My mom didn't look up from her knitting. Don't you know it's the change of seasons? When the temperature suddenly drops, you'll regret not having this. Yeah, my dad chimed in, putting down the newspaper. Sophia, your health is important. I rolled my eyes. My dad gestured for me to come closer. I walked over, and he studied me with a smile. You've grown taller, gained a little weight, and most importantly, you've become even more beautiful. Taller, true, gained weight. My dad's eyes must be failing him. More beautiful. Fact, being beautiful doesn't matter if she doesn't know how to dress herself. She'll never find a boyfriend like this. My mom interjected with a huff. I couldn't let that slide. I took a sip of water and retorted. I'm a student. Why do I need to dress up? Do you think if I show up to exams looking like a peacock, the professors will pass me? I had to admit, having my dad home made me bolder. I even dared to talk back to my mom. But I had a point, and my mom just rolled her eyes, choosing not to argue. Sophia's right, my dad said. And besides, my daughter could never be unwanted. Ethan seems like a great kid. I choked on my water, coughing so hard my face turned red. My dad patted my back, scolding me. Why are you so careless? Little did he know, his words had shocked me. My mom shook her head. Forget it. Ethan's got great grades, good looks, and a great personality. Your daughter's not on his level. I decided it was time for a paternity test, but before I could schedule one, I was given a task. Ethan's parents were out for a dinner event, so he was coming over for dinner. My mom pushed me out the door, urging me, go call Ethan over. As I walked toward Ethan's house, I muttered to myself, I'm definitely getting that paternity test. Definitely. Ethan's house was a 2-story villa, but I'd been going there since I was a kid, so I knew my way around. Today, though, the house felt unnaturally quiet, almost eerie, as if a blood-covered figure might jump out at any moment. Okay. Maybe I'd been watching too many horror movies. I knocked on Ethan's door, but there was no answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. I knocked a third time. Patience was clearly my strong suit. When there was still no response, I frowned. Were they all out? Was this some kind of joke? I opened the door, and Ethan's familiar, clean scent hit me. I fought the urge to breathe it in deeply. The room was dark. The only light coming from the fading daylight outside. The light switch was by Ethan's bedside, so I fumbled my way toward it. As I reached out, my hand brushed against something warm and smooth. What the hell was that? I froze, then instinctively gave it a squeeze. My wrist was suddenly grabbed, and I nearly screamed. But Ethan's voice cut through the darkness, low and rough with sleep. Sophia. My heart raced. I scrambled to find the switch and flipped it on. Ethan blinked against the sudden light. The warm glow softened his features, making him look almost harmless. Why are you here? Ethan asked, his voice still rough from sleep. I was still recovering from the scare and couldn't help but complain. Why didn't you answer the door? I was knocking forever. You scared me to death. Ethan cleared his throat. I didn't hear you. My mom wants you to come over for dinner, I said, noticing the slight frown on his face. He didn't look too comfortable. Remembering my mom's comment about knitting a scarf last night, I asked, Ethan, are you sick? He nodded. Yeah. Can you grab the medicine from under the coffee table in the living room? I hurried to the living room to get the medicine. I even boiled some water in the kitchen, being extra thoughtful, and brought it back to his bedroom. Ethan was sitting up in bed now, leaning against the headboard. His face was pale, and his hair was tousled, falling softly over his forehead. He looked oddly vulnerable. He took the medicine and water from me, giving me a curious look. You boiled water. I glared at him. Do I look like a completely useless person to you? Ethan smirked, popping the pill into his mouth and taking a sip of water. As I watched his Adam's apple bob, I couldn't help but swallow hard. So that's what I had touched earlier. My gaze must have been too obvious because when Ethan put the cup down and looked at me, I froze. His lips, now moist from the water, looked soft and inviting, and kissable. Ethan reached out and covered my eyes with his hand, his voice unusually flustered. What are you doing? I blinked, my ears burning as I pulled his hand away, trying to sound composed. I said, I just think you look delicate when you're sick. It makes me want to bully you. Ethan's eyebrow twitched, his dark eyes locking onto mine. He leaned in closer until his nose was almost touching mine. The proximity was overwhelming. How do you want to bully me? He asked, his voice low and teasing. His tone, already naturally smooth, now carried a hint of something else, something that made my heart race. The room, once spacious, now felt claustrophobic with his face so close to mine. I stared at him, speechless, the atmosphere growing increasingly charged. This wasn't right. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. Even someone as composed as me was starting to crack under the pressure. And since when did Ethan become so flirty? Desperate to break the tension, I reached out and grabbed his head, shaking it back and forth. Did the fever fry your brain or something? Ethan wasn't expecting my sudden move, and his hands instinctively went to my waist to steady us both, preventing us from tumbling off the bed. His expression darkened. Let go. I quickly released him, unsure of what to say next. Then, to my surprise, Ethan laughed, a low, melodic sound that sent shivers down my spine. Sophia, he said, his voice still laced with amusement. You're blushing. Did you know that?